I persuaded my wife of 44 years to come with me today, and having achieved that, I received a call asking if I would participate in the taping of a video this morning in Wall Township in Monmouth County. So I jumped up this morning. She knew that I was due at lunchtime here, and I jumped up this morning getting ready to run out there in order to get back here on time, and I said, "Hurry up, we gotta go." She said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I gotta go here, I gotta go there." She said, "No, count me out." And I'm standing here right now, and this is not your concern, it's mine, regretting that I accepted that video assignment, because I would have given anything to have Barbara Howard hear George talk about me like that. Let me tell you, I am not that guy at home to my wife. And she told me if I get arrested again, I would just be in there by myself. She wouldn't own me. But I'm happy to meet my fellow mortals here today. My fellow mortals. Whenever I stand before the congregation, now and then, and Lent, of course, is an excellent time to remind them that one day we would be, as Professor Cornel West likes to say, the culinary delight of terrestrial worms. And somewhere, beloved, somewhere along the way, I resolved, given this truth, that I wanted my life to count for something. I wanted the time that I had, and Job reminds us that that time is short and filled with trouble. I wanted that time to have consequences. Not necessarily to leave some dramatic, historic mark, but in some small way to move the ball of civilization toward justifying my having passed this way. And that really is summing up what motivates me when I get up in the morning. That motivates me to do whatever I do. And I'm motivated to do this without extraordinary talents or skills. I'm an admirer, I mean really a deep admirer of the late Steve Jobs. Not so much how he behaved in private, I don't know much about that, but the extraordinary way that he has impacted our civilization through his leadership and technological knowledge. There are so many other people that I could name in so many different fields. I'm a great fan of jazz. But if I were tempted to take saxophone lessons and I heard Sonny Rollins, I would put the idea aside, because there would be no way for me ever to reach the height of excellence that I see in Sonny Rollins. But just to say that whoever we are and whatever talents we have, whatever aptitude or inclination we may have, put that to work in some small way to roll the ball of civilization a little bit further down the path. And let me say that I was motivated in getting to this because my back was against the wall. I'm not sure that any of us really make important decisions in life until we have to. My back was against the wall, though surrounded constantly by love on every side. I was born black in the bowels of the Jim Crow South after the Second World War. And though there are very humane things I recall about that past and lots of wonderful times, in no way do I want to even give a hint of glorifying those days. My back against the wall, the limitations imposed by law, the limitations imposed by custom were real and profoundly restricting. Some of you have that testimony. The bookends of mortality, that space between birth and death, induced my sense of urgency. I discovered early the power of fear and the power of ignorance. It was all around me. And change was my only route to earthly hope. Change in my predicament, change in my situation. And I gleaned that education and courage, those two, if nothing else, were the keys to change. And when people had these two things, the illusion of isolation, the illusion of tribalism and self-containment exploded. There were signs. There was Koinonia Farm, led by Clarence Jordan, a white Greek scholar who elected to live off the earth in a commune that was racially mixed, to endure the violent attacks, to send his white children to the segregated white high school and have them persecuted and attacked as if they were black, voluntarily. The signs. When the young people, many of whom from the north, some of whom quite privileged, not all, came to Southwest Georgia to expose their lives to utter uncertainty and danger in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, these were the signs that isolation, tribalism, and self-containment was simply not an option. And in 1963, coming from that agrarian region of Southwest Georgia, I went to the great metropolis of Atlanta. Arrived on the campus of Morehouse College. And I have to tell you that when I think back on those days, to give you just one clue of how utterly unguided, not misguided, but unguided I was, and maybe because of a tinge of arrogant self-assurance, and I'm feeling weak in my knees just thinking about this, I applied to just one college. Of course, I thought Morehouse would be blessed to have me come. But I arrived that day driven by a cousin who owned a rather shabby Corvair. Some of you remember that car, with the trunk in the front. And I think we had to stop en route to Atlanta 2 or 3 times because of car trouble. But I arrived there, and as we came down into the back of historic Graves Hall, the first building on the campus, I heard this young black man yelling down to an apparent friend walking along the sidewalk in fluent French. I was impressed, but even more impressed when the person to whom he was speaking responded in fluent French. I knew then that I was offered a window into a world that was not my own. There was Benjamin Mays. There was Martin King. There was Howard Thurman. There was Lucius Tobin, and on and on and on. The power of the mind and the courage to act upon what we know. Sam Williams, the philosophy professor of Martin King, had us turn in our intro to philosophy to the obituary page. And we had an assignment to read the obituaries of people that we didn't know. And Sam Williams, in his own special way, was helping us to see that without intent we are all writing our obituaries. After Morehouse, I was almost accidentally introduced to what was known as the ecumenical movement. And of course, I was always trying, George, to interpret whatever I was doing to my home community in a way that made sense. I remember being invited to speak at my home church after having attended Princeton for a while and then gone off to New York to work at the Interchurch Center. The deacon who was going to introduce me asked me what was the name of my church. And I said, well, Bob. You know, in other words, how could I explain to him that my ministry was the big, broad world? His only concept of ministry was that I pastored a church. But in that movement, I was exposed to examples of courage on the world stage. The liberation of Southern Africa, the persecution of Koreans in Japan, the plight of the Maoris in New Zealand, and so on and so on, the Algerians living in France, the price of witness in these places reminded me, as Martin was reminded in his speech against the Vietnam War at the Riverside Church, how the people in Vietnam reminded him of the people in Mississippi. So when I saw people representing the tea plantation workers in Sri Lanka, then Ceylon, risk everything for a time it was unlikely, even if they lived a long life, to ever see. The light that I witnessed in these mortals sharing the planet with the little boy from Americus, Georgia, their light began to shine on my own setting. And that is why I possess today a deep and abiding conviction which I hope you share. And that is, we are all in the same boat, like it or not. We are all, Putin is in the boat with you this morning. All of those horrible people that we're invited to hate with our media, they're in the same boat. All of our enemies, national and otherwise, they're in the same boat. These things that I've mentioned are really the high points in hindsight that were to set my life on course. And there are things that I've done in the past that teach me that I was certifiably insane. And I will never go back there. And if I'm ever tempted, Mrs. Howard is my security. But I can say to you that I've been blessed. And we're all blessed. Aside from family and good friends, we are blessed with an opportunity to serve in ways that help us grow in our awareness of the commonality we all share. I said to George, I was invited to do that video in celebration of a woman who had just been named to be honored by the American Council of Diversity, or for Diversity. And the man wanted to know why, for the record, did I think diversity in a profit-making corporation was important? I said, you know, some organizations may dare to pursue diversity. They may dare to pursue diversity out of a sense of social concern, out of a sense of charity. But unless the company can see a connection between the diversification of its workforce and its bottom line, there will be no abiding commitment to diversity. Now, let me just say, I repeated this word diversity more than once because I was underscoring a point. Westina Matthews, the highest-ranking black woman, at least at that time, in Merrill Lynch, was invited to lead the retreat of the trustees of New York Seminary. And the theme of that retreat was, in fact, diversity. New York Theological Seminary, one of the largest theological seminaries in the Northeast, prided itself at being overwhelmingly people of non-European background. We wanted to understand what this tremendous opportunity presented to us, and so we were going to discuss in depth the subject. Westina pointed out that at that time, as I'm sure is true today, Merrill Lynch had people of every conceivable racial and sexual orientation and linguistic and national background, but they all went to Harvard Law School. I think we often don't understand these concepts that become popularized, but I'm going to say that even the charge to social relevance and the determination of the why to make a dent in the world civilization, which is quite compatible with your heritage, will not be sustained very long unless you see a connection between the work you do and your bottom line. And the bottom line that you pursue in extending yourselves to others is a bottom line that you as an individual are not likely to ever see. You're investing in a future that you believe in that you will not inherit. But you're given opportunities to serve and grow. No assignment is too small, I hope. You're given an opportunity to learn something about anything from almost everybody. And I can always get something interesting started, but I have found that I can never finish it well without a team. And I found that faith prevents me from getting burned out. Faith is what keeps me expecting only just a little from my fellow human beings. I found that I shouldn't expect much more of you than I expect of myself. I know how vulnerable and how prone to error I am, so I'm going to hold you to the same standards. And it allows me to celebrate small victories. So many people embark on changing the world who can't celebrate small victories, so they become frustrated, they become cynical, they withdraw. And I've found that faith helps me travel the road less traveled. Longevity has its place, as does consistency. We know that Martin King, in one of his final orations, sermons, talked about the importance and the place of longevity. I would say that longevity has its place, and if you're going to be blessed with it, consistency is its best companion. If you knew me then, you would recognize me now. I have less hair, but I'm on the same path. The issues have changed. The vision of the beloved community never does. But what are the roots? Always looking for different roots, always appreciating there's more than one way to skin a cat. The queries from the youth I encounter daily. One young man who came into my office not very long ago, he walked to the picture on the wall and he said to his contemporary, "Look, there's a picture of Dr. Howard with Martin Luther King." Except it was a picture with Nelson Mandela. So we, it seems, contemplate a new resolve. We contemplate a service that is impactful in a place where living memories of pivotal human events are vague. One young man, knowing that I came from very lowly beginnings, and despite my wife's impression, still in lowly presence, let me just say, he said to me, "Dr. Howard," I was then at New York Seminary, just a few blocks from Penn Station, and he said, "How did you get here?" And I said, "Well, I walked over from the train station." But the notion is there is a formula. There is a way to chart our course to lead to what we perceive to be success. But I want to say that we have too little interest in the long march, not as much interest in the relay race, not much of a vision beyond this personal vale of tears. And I say that if you embark to reach for the sky, we will have to stand on one another's shoulders. And we may not reach that sky ourselves, but we shall reach toward the sky. Because what we do in the name of social investment is beyond this veil of tears. And I always say that the fickle world should not be our anchor. The fickle world is seldom there when we are in a pinch. The other night for my birthday, my second son and his girlfriend took me to see the Brooklyn Nets play the Chicago Bulls. And I got on the train to come back into New Jersey, and I sat next to a woman who obviously was not a commuter because she began to talk to me. And we talked about how this man had come onto the train. I saw him as I boarded the train, and I knew there was something going on, but I didn't know exactly because there was a certain feeling in the car. And there was a seat next to this woman. I sat down, and I said, "What's going on?" She said, he's trying to shake us down. If you ever rode that train from Penn Station coming to Jersey, those people who get on the train and they say, "I need a little money, I want to go to New Brunswick and I don't have quite enough money." How many of you ever experienced that? Anybody? Okay, so this guy was shaking down, and she said, "And sir, I tried to give him $10, but the man in front of me said, 'Put your money back. Put your money back.'" And I said, "Oh yeah." I said, you haven't been on this train much, because this is a pretty routine thing." I said, "But tell me, what motivated you to want to give that man your money?" And she was a working woman. You could tell. She wasn't rolling in dough, as we say, but she was willing to give him $10, a total stranger. I said, "Why?" She said, "Well, I keep thinking maybe one day I'll need $10. And I said to her, "That day may indeed come, but please know that that guy is not going to give it to you." You see, I'm George's friend, but I don't know if he's going to show up when I appear in court. You know, if it's a traffic ticket, he might show up. But, you know, what are the other potential pitfalls of a humble parish priest? You cannot base your own resolve on fickle mortals. I found that if you want to do something bold in the why, if you want to really crack the mold in the why, the people who love you the most will caution you against it. Why? Because their sense of security is all linked up with yours. And after all, it is your risk. I'll tell you, when I went to Syria to obtain the release of the Navy pilot with Reverend Jackson back in 1983, my aunt, who's a retailer, had come to our home for the first time at Christmas in 30 years. Because at Christmas, she's always busy. She came, and lo and behold, an invitation, come to seek the release of the Navy pilot. My aunt, who was so happy to see me with my children and so forth and so on, and I love that woman. She said, baby, look at your family. You ought to be here with your children and your wife. You know, she doesn't want you to go off to some strange place on Christmas. And she was tearing up. Oh, Lord. And finally I said, oh, you're right, but I just got to do this. We had no idea that when we went to Syria, President Assad would actually turn this guy over to us, but we came back with him on the plane. It was huge. If you're old enough, you remember that. You can even admit you're old enough, you can remember that. But by the time I came home, and I'm closing, my aunt had gone back to her place in Chicago, and it was after Christmas, just a few days. I get a phone call. Ring. Yes? It's my aunt. She said, I just had to call you, baby. She said, guess who's coming to my house in about 15 minutes? I said, well, I don't know. She said, it's W so-and-so TV. I said, really? I said, why are they coming? Oh, they want to interview Cecil and me. That's her husband. And I said, well, what's the deal? She said, they found out that we knew you. So you will have to take the risk to plow the new ground. And if you fail, they will never even admit to knowing you. But if it flowers in something beautiful results, not only will they admit to knowing you, they will even in certain quarters suggest it was their idea. Our loved ones always discourage us from taking risks, but they always applaud us when our risks succeed. When you go to the gym, some of you go, right? Some of you have gym memberships, which is a little different from going to the gym. But you work out, you want to be in good physical shape, but every now and then you are pressed to test whether all of your hard work in the gym has borne fruit. I was such a person who went to the gym every day, and I commuted from a certain suburban train station to my office in New York. And I remember one day having an urgent meeting in the city, and the last train that would get me there on time pulled into the station, and I was some 10 or 15 minutes from the track. So then I got to test whether my gym visits had borne fruit. I use this as an allegory. You prepare yourself for all kinds of things, artificially, in a vacuum. Earnestly, you pursue the conditioning required. But you don't know if you're really ready until the storm comes. And not only will the storm teach you indelible lessons that will be of value for the rest of your life, there are storms you never want to relive. So I encourage you from some place deep down in your being to take risks for a future you may never see. Take risks that the people you know care about you discourage you from seeing, but recognizing that you are sandwiched between a birth that you didn't ask for and a death that will come before you know it. How will you and I fill in the space? God bless you.